The power of two, the power of one, the power of empty. I think that's a more accurate song catered to the Acolyte after what happened with episode 3 by Leslye Headland. And of course, let's not forget about the fact that Dave Filoni gave this thing the okay. He is the one that fully supports Leslye Headland and loves episode 3 with everything that actually transpired in the episode and everything else that is actually coming out of Kathleen Kennedy and everything that she has done to the Star Wars universe and the philosophy by George Lucas. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. Now, one interesting aspect related to the current status of Lucasfilm is that we know that they are in currently basically a financial situation where we have a lot of firings that are actually pretty much moving ahead by Bob Iger and the Disney executives, along with a lot of cutbacks, a lot of budgeting cutbacks to be very specific for the films, for the TV shows, and everything related to them in that sense. But looking at the Acolyte episode 3 and what is looming for episode 4, and I said this before, I'll say it again, there will be a short moment in episode 4 that kind of taps into pronouns and putting that in the dialogue of one of the characters. We'll talk more about that later on, especially after the episode debuts tonight. But what's interesting about everything going on with the whole Leslye Headland situation at Lucasfilm, things recently got worse for her overall pretty much placement over at the company and what's been going on after the Acolyte episode 3 backlash and just the backlash in general for the series. Now, specifically, of course, on top of everything here, with the Acolyte episode 4 looming for the Acolyte, that will only cause more ratings, of course, to fall for Disney and Lucasfilm. One major development now has more to do with Leslye Headland and her situation at Lucasfilm after the failure of episode 3 and what is expected to follow with episode 4, forcing pronouns into Star Wars. Now, one significant update to Leslie's scenario at Lucasfilm has to do with what, of course, Bob Iger and the Disney board recently did to the showrunner/director after many financial and creative differences have been an ongoing issue, by the way, for months. With her, however, the ratings failure of episode 3 was the deal breaker, reportedly for the majority of the board, where initially Headland was promised, get this, to take over as vice president of Lucasfilm, after of course becoming a part of the Lucasfilm story group for at least 2 years. That was the plan. The plan by Disney that was discussed with Kathleen Kennedy previously was to have Leslye put on the story group at least for, of course, 2 years at a high rank, moving up to vice president eventually of Lucasfilm to further operate the company by 2027, and how diversity, equity, and inclusion would be utilized in many upcoming Star Wars films and shows. Those two promotion plans were recently taken away that was decided by Bob Iger. It turns out the majority of the board had to pressure Bob Iger to make that call to cancel all promotions for Leslye Headland, along with canceling her High Republic Star Wars trilogy for Disney+, which was planned to be a series of 3 high-budget Star Wars films based on the Star Wars High Republic books that were going to be called Star Wars Eclipse Volume 1 through 3. Now, in addition to this, Headland also lost a multi-million-dollar contract deal that was going to be at most around $20 to $25 million, including the movies, for both directing and writing gigs that would span both Marvel and Star Wars related projects. The majority of those projects have been recently axed. Headland reportedly also, of course, already played the diversity card against Disney and is blaming that they are against women. This is a prime example of how they eventually eat their own, with a major disagreement that takes place in between related to equality that they don't agree on. Now, already Headland is warning to take legal action against the Disney heads, since Headland's contract was reportedly nearly complete, with some parts of her contract still up for discussion. Now, in addition to this, however, the Disney executives also decided to ban Leslye Headland from appearing on any of the current Lucasfilm production sets moving onwards. Now, more on that in just a second, guys. Let me just say one thing about this, is that the fact that Disney was even thinking, or even planning, of moving Leslye Headland up to the Lucasfilm story group, which would place her to make more creative calls, generally speaking, for all movies, for all shows, books, comics, whatever it may be, kind of on a Dave Filoni status level, moving her up into that rank. What's interesting about this is that they were also considering of how that would eventually pretty much transition to a vice president position over at Lucasfilm to work hand in hand with Kathleen Kennedy. Now, as we talked about this a couple of days ago, Kathleen Kennedy is already in a move to seek a renewal of her contract at Lucasfilm. We all know it comes to a conclusion this year, 2024. She wants to renew it another 3 years. That's a thing that's up for discussion right now. More and more board members are beginning to pressure Iger to not let that happen, though the amount of board members are said to be on the smaller margin of things. But interestingly enough, yet again, we know that Leslye Headland is not fit for Star Wars at all. What she did with Episode 3 was garbage tier. It was a dumpster fire. I mean, to be honest with you guys, it makes The Last Jedi look like a masterpiece. It's that bad. I never thought that I would live to see the day that Star Wars would get any worse than what we saw with The Last Jedi by director Rian Johnson. Well, here we are. You know, I think that they went all out. They're not even hiding their agenda anymore. It is so in your face, and especially it's going to be even more so with Episode 4 dropping a couple of pronouns in a little piece of dialogue. It's not even done in a vague way. They really put it out there. We'll talk more about that later on. But moving onwards, and though, of course, she is still attached to one Lucasfilm project after losing a total of 6 of them, including the Acolyte Season 2, that is now in shambles, she was specifically forced by Disney to not visit the sets of the Mandalorian and Grogu Star Wars movie and the Rey Star Wars film once they begin filming sometime in 2025 by the first quarter of that year. Headland is now in an endless battle against Disney to reinstate parts of her contract to get those promotions that she was promised back for Lucasfilm. Now, Disney already has another strategy going on right now, guys, is that they want somebody else to take over Leslye Headland for the projects that she had lost, somebody that would still be attached to that agenda, however would have better PR skills, would have a better behavior in their interviews, or any kind of press at that, reducing the amount of damage, so to speak, at a more, one-on-one scenario. So what Leslye Headland did in that rap interview, I think is really what did it for the fans. That is what really caused the chaos when it came to the press tour disaster. And it only gets worse because, well, Disney at the same exact time, they're still allowing Headland to spew such nonsense, to say such, terrible things about George, about the fans, about what Star Wars needs to be or what it should be, and it's not making things any better. So I don't know what Disney's thinking at the same exact time, but I would like to hear what everyone has to say about the current status of Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy. If I were Kathleen Kennedy, I would step down right now. We all know why she is not getting fired. A lot of it, by the way, has to do with her husband, Frank Marshall. Very, very high status person in the film industry. So there's obviously some kind of bridge there, but I would like to hear what you all have to say about this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.